Welcome back to our second edition of Rugby Deconstructed, Chasing Great. With me is Greg from Cape Town and Richard here in Centurion with me. Welcome back, chaps.
Good to be back.
Good stuff. Let's get stuck in. We've got a lot to talk about still. We finished off with the 2007 Rugby World Cup. And the way the documentary portrayed this is the turning point for Richie McCaw in terms of how he handles himself on the field and how he approaches the game. But as we were talking offline, it brought up an interesting fact that the documentary had a very distinct view of how they tend to beat the Australians, but almost in a way ignored the South African factor.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I say, for me, the turning point for the All Blacks wasn't 2007, but actually more 2009. I mean, if what I mentioned, they opened up 2009 with a loss at home in New Zealand. I think they lost in Wellington. They lost to France, and followed it up with further losses in South Africa. At home against South Africa, and only really on their end of year tour did they regather some momentum and some form. And 2010 was actually, I think, more the turning point for them, where they beat South Africa twice at home and at FNB in John Smith's 100th Test match. So the turning point for me was actually more 2009, after they had to learn a lot more lessons then than what they actually did after that 07 loss.
Yeah, and Greg?
Yeah, no, 100%. And the thing is, I think for the purposes of a documentary, it was so much easier to just lean into the narrative of World Cups as being literally the only rugby that we play, just to keep the continuity of the story and miss out, obviously, the years in between. And because, I mean, I think we could have Chasing Great could be a 24 episode series over the course of 4 seasons if we were going to strip it out and talk about all the sort of titular characters along the way. So I think it would have been easier just for the documentary to focus on the World Cup, because obviously 2009, as you mentioned, Richard, they came in for a lot of hurt, and I think they would have done most of their growing and learning from that year.
Yeah, and another thing that we mustn't get distracted is that this documentary is also about Richard McCaw, not the All Black team. And it focused on his individual growth and his decision making, and how he changed over time from how he approached the game, but still was that combative gladiator that led from the front, was always competitive, didn't want to lose. But yeah, and you know, it really didn't focus on his individual battles with individuals or teams, and it more just on how to approach the game as a professional.
Yeah. I mean the mental aspect, I think, is the main theme of the movie, which I'm sure we're obviously going to get stuck into now. They really talk about how he approaches the game, how he prepares for the game, and basically what makes him tick, and the battles that he gets up for, and it won't be for every single rugby player, but it mentions in the film he loves the dark stuff, the prepping for the dark side, where people don't necessarily have the appetite for that. He wants to be put into those positions and situations because he enjoys it. I mean, being a pilot and prepping for, they literally say it in the movie, prepping for bad flights and not only good flights. So,
yeah.
So I think that's the main theme. I mean, as I said in the previous edition, I said I would have wanted more change room footage, more banter, more inter sort of player banter. But I think the focus of the film was the sort of mental side of the game, and how to get up from a debilitating loss like obviously 2007 was, into 2011 and 2015.
Another adding to what you've said there, Greg, the media after 2007. That was his first World Cup as a captain. He had been made captain in 2006. So he was relatively still a young captain. And, the media fallout, some of the comments there and the views from some of the fans, they just wanted to cull players. And, fortunately, what a coach knows and what the hierarchy within a rugby environment knows, who are at the coalface, compared to a fan and a weekend warrior on a keyboard, is totally different. And, fortunately, New Zealand kept their heads in terms of keeping that whole crew together and taking them forward to 2011. And then also, obviously, when Graham Henry retired, Steve Hansen taking them on to 2015.
Yeah, I think you're quite right, hitting the nail on the head with the media there. If you look at it, end of 2007, wanting heads to roll, but 4 losses over 3 years. That was the record that they had. I mean, if you look at, so we recently won with us winning the World Cup recently. We've had more losses in 2 years before our win than they had over that period of time. But yet the media just focused on that loss against France. And I mean, if you I remember looking back at that movie, there's a clip there where they actually set up for a drop goal towards the end of the game against France. If that had gone over, it would have been a whole different story. I mean, with that, and the media tends to forget that they were literally a score away from remaining in, and up until that point, they were still the dominant force in world rugby. Even though the Boks won, they were still the dominant force. Let's not beat around the bush about that.
Yeah, great.
It definitely shows the hurt that New Zealand as a nation obviously went through, from winning its inaugural one in '87 to literally not getting across the line in every edition since.
Kind of like Liverpool.
Sorry?
Kind of like Liverpool.
Yeah. So I think they put so much pressure. I mean, a bit of shade of sort of the British media, especially in that fallout. But I mean, Richard, obviously 3-4 losses over the 3 years is the record. I mean, you can't obviously sniff at that. I mean, we would obviously kill for a record over that same time period. So interesting how hard the NZ media came down on them, because that was combative.
Yeah. This also almost leads into the next point that we're highlighting, is the importance of experience. When when you look at that 2007 World Cup, then you go to 2011, 2015, and even now with the 2019 World Cup, Graham Henry had already been to a World Cup with Wales. Wayne Smith had coached the All Blacks. Steve Hansen had also coached Wales, coached in Ireland. They had an extremely experienced coaching team that had toured the world, coached at international level, and had been at World Cups that were leading this All Black side. So, if we had to now compare that to South Africa, and for the first time now, we haven't thrown a coach under the bus or kicked him out or not renewed his contract after a World Cup. Look back at 1995. Thanks, Kitch Christie. Cheers. Thanks for coming. Then you go on, Nick Mallett, cheers, thanks for coming. Jake White wins. He gets the boot. He said, if you want your job, you must reapply. Heineken Meyer, sorry, he's calling it a day. The pressure's too much. And, we just don't seem to, fortunately now we've got to still see the fruit of what Russie's got planned for us. But we just didn't seem to, even if we had the players, we didn't seem to have the ability to apply a continuity in terms of selection, keeping experienced hands, a lot of egos and personality at play there. I don't know if you've drawn any experience like that, Greg, from your time playing, without pointing fingers or throwing people under the bus.
Well, I think there's sort of some similarities with Rassie going abroad, head coach at Munster. I mean, Hansen did it, Henry did it, Gatlin did it for obviously years and years with Wales, and I'm sure he'll be in the running in the next 10 years for some type of position in with the All Blacks. So it's almost, I mean, I've seen some similarities with that, and it's almost, we've always had a 4-year mindset in this country. We always reset after 4 years, and with Rassie coming in on a 6-year contract, Eddie Jones on a 6-year contract, just been renewed to 2023. So it's almost like we are centralizing the leadership and the decision making with a longer term goal in mind. So touch wood, we sort of continue on a long term planning process, and not sort of obviously throwing the coaches under the bus, chucking everybody out at the sort of first sign of trouble. I mean, it'll be interesting to see that 2016-2017 period with Alistair Coetzee, if there was a plan for anywhere further than the World Cup that it would have been last year. And obviously he got the boots end of 2017. Rassie comes in, puts this plan in place. It'll be interesting to see that sort of change in focus, which we haven't necessarily had literally over the time we've sort of post-isolation.
Yeah. Richard, just before I bring you in here, you know, at the 2015 World Cup, we were one penalty away from beating New Zealand in that semi-final. And even Richard McCaw in the movie said he stated they had our number, and he was pretty sure that they were going to go through. But he also slipped in that their discipline let them down on the day. So we were, if we just got in the right area, had a penalty, we had Pollard, who was on song that day with the boot, who could have started the penalty, and it could have been a total different story. But if we look at that team that played in 2015, how many players, and I bring this up because a lot of people are not a Heineken Meyer fan, but if you look at all those players that he blooded and he brought in, yes, he brought in Farida Priya and he brought in Victor Matfield at the expense of some good youngsters at that stage. But when you look at all the youngsters he did bring in, Frans Malherbe, Eben Etzebeth, Loet de Jager, Damien de Allende, Jesse Creel, and you look at those names, all those players went on to their second World Cup, and we know what the end result was over there. So it's, a lot of people poo-poo the role of experience in a setup, and it actually does play a very important role, and the key is actually finding the balance between having quality youngsters with senior players who are still able to perform, kind of what Rassie was able to achieve this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's points that Greg made and that you made there that I also think we need to highlight is where we got it wrong in 07 already. I mean, I remember don't know if you remember, there was a show on SuperSport Sundays, All Out Rugby, a few years ago. And Nas Goethe at that point in time in 07, the day after the final, said, what can South Africa learn from this to not have to wait another 12 years for a World Cup? And we got it wrong on so many levels. I mean, the first thing was even it being reported in the media that Heineke Meyer should have actually gotten the job in 2008, but a last-minute swing vote meant that he was out of the running. So he could have effectively had 8 years in charge of the team as well, as Greg mentioned, the 4-year cycle that we tend to look at. And as you say, interestingly, then the majority of the squad that Heineke Meyer actually brought in, and guys who actually featured at the 2015 World Cup, again, guys that he brought in: Willie Leroux, Sia Kolisi, Damien de Allende, as you mentioned, Eben Etzebeth, Peter Steph de Toy. I mean, Trevor Nekanye. It's our core. Our core seniors were actually brought into the system by Heineke Meyer. And interestingly enough, Faf de Klerk was also already brought into Bok camps by Heineke Meyer, even though Alistair Coetzee would probably like to take the credit for giving him these international breakthrough. But there again, you can see the trend where players that Alistair Coetzee actually brought into the team as well, or into the squad, it's very limited. It's more the core of Heineke Meyer's guys, and again, learning from the same mistakes as what New Zealand did. Maybe there's a there's a formula there to losing a knockout game by 2 points, because there you've got guys, again, you've got your Eben Etzebeth, your Sia Colisis, Dale Lenders, your Jesse Greels, Billy Leroux, Andre Pollard, that suffers a 2-point loss in a semi-final, yet when faced with the same situation 4 years later, level against Wales with a few minutes to go, know what to do, get over the line, and I mean, they were more than ready in the final. So there's a point to be made from, as we say, we threw Heineke Meyer under the bus maybe or we actually mistreated him. He should have gotten these 8 years, firstly, and secondly, he got too much ridicule for 2015. I mean, 2015 he started off quite strong, but then again, I think it's that loss against Argentina at home that caught him off guard, and from there it was downhill, really.
Yeah.
Can I put a question to you, Alex, just on an unrelated note? So obviously Japan, the Brighton miracle, that happens, and we all have our own sort of recollections of that day. But say, for instance, that happens, we get a penalty against New Zealand, we got a final against Australia, we managed to get across the line, and we world champs 2015. How do you think we would remember that tournament? Obviously, world champions, being the first team to have lost a pool game, obviously it lost against Japan. It would be interesting, because the reason why I sort of put it to you guys is that we did come close to beating New Zealand in the semi, but it almost felt like we didn't deserve to be there because we had lost to Japan in the pool phase, and obviously that being just such a massive result for World Rugby, and coming up against New Zealand, losing by, I mean, we were surprised by how close we got, basically. I mean, they had just given France 60, and now we just didn't expect to get so close. So I feel, I mean, to put it, I can't remember who always said it, but it was a winning loss in 28 to 18 down, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think what I found especially true from that 2015 World Cup is that loss against Japan, it almost it destroyed the Bok aura for a bit during that tournament, because I don't know about you, but I always had the feeling the next game, again, I mean, I was stressing for when we face Samoa, like, is this going to happen again? Stressing against the USA in the week, like, hopefully this doesn't happen again. You were on edge the whole time. I mean, what I mean about the Bok aura being destroyed there, but that's been recovered. 12 months before that, we had a home test against Wales where the Welsh were leading something like 30-17. We were 13 points down, yet you always had this feeling in the back of mind that the Boks are going to come back. They're going to, we were always going to come back. We're always going to pull this one out of the bag. And then it felt after that Japan lost that, hang on, we've now lost that aura. We're not going to be able to pull these rabbits out of the hat anymore, which I think Rassie has restored to a bit. But that, I think it definitely destroyed that for that tournament. You were a lot more on edge. And you're true in saying there that, yes, it almost felt like we were lucky to progress as far as we did in 2015.
Yeah, and I want to, with what, Greg, with your question, and then adding on to what Richard mentioned. Firstly, that 2015 World Cup, if we won it, irrespective or not, if you ask anybody about that tournament, their first answer is Boks lost to Japan. It's a blemish that's there that will overshadow any victory that we had. And then, you know, a lot of people don't, when you ask them about that World Cup, they don't realize that the Springboks scored more. I think it was over four tries per game. They got to within 2 points of beating the world #1 side and world champions at that moment. You know, people don't think about it. They just remember that loss to Japan. And you know, now bringing it back to obviously the topic, you know, that Springboks side didn't have the experience in knowing how to find a way to win when the chips are down. And now we rewind back to 2007 and Richie McCaw. What did he say? We were in a position that we didn't know how to win the game when we were facing this dark demon. And no matter what the Springboks did, they couldn't outfox that All Black side, because that All Black side had been together for so long. They knew exactly what tricks were being played and what they would need to do to end up winning end up winning that semi-final, even if it was by 2 points. So, if we had to compare the 2015 World Cup side of the Springboks and compare it to the 2007 Springbok, that 2007 Springbok side knew how to win. They'd won a final. They'd won 2 close games against the British and Irish Lions in 2009. They knew how to win close games, and then unfortunately got unstuck and missed out in a semi-final against New Zealand in 2011 in New Zealand. We'll have to thank a ref for that.
Yeah.
All right.
But there again, you look at the amount of guys that had to go through that 03 experience of the box squad as well.
Yes.
Your Victor Matfield, your Bucky Bottas,
Daniel Rousseau, Jacques Fourie,
Fourie
de Pierre wasn't part of that. He missed out, fortunately.
Yeah, your John Smith. I mean, John Smith known to win the World Cup, but you actually don't even realize his first game or his first test as captain was thrown in the deep end in the 2003 World Cup to captain the midweek squad against Georgia. So I mean, there was those experiences those lessons were learned back then. So it's almost I think the 10-14 spoke about it a year ago, where they spoke about the hurt factor that a team has. So I think it's getting back to that. I mean, and I think what better hurt factor did we not have than Alistair Coetzee? So I mean, in terms of that, it's those lessons that were learned.
Yeah, before we head towards the conclusion, reading his book and watching this video, I get a little bit nostalgic for myself. Never having played at the highest level or reaching great heights of playing for first teams and stuff, I still felt like this documentary speaks to almost any individual who loves the game of rugby. There was just something about every single clip and every little thing that he spoke about that you could take out from the movie and go, geez, I can apply this to my life. Or I remember experiencing that, in the 1 year they show the Otago boys playing against Rotorua, and I see him running onto the field with his Canterbury scrum cap. And, if I hadn't known better, like I know the reason I'm bringing it up, because they're both the same age, born in the same year. If you told me that was Joe van Niekerk running on the field, it brought back that type of memory, sitting in the stands, watching Joe van Niekerk play, dominating sides, helping us beat teams that we hadn't beaten in many years. And this comes back again to how South African rugby gets it wrong. Joe van Niekerk had been identified in 1995 already as a potential SA schools player and provincial player in South Africa. So in South Africa, our identification of players isn't an issue. In McCaw's case, Steve Hansen was at the academy, Crusader Academy or Canterbury Academy, and he was like, we've got to do whatever we can to get this guy into our academy. And there's massive rivalry between Otago and Canterbury and the Crusaders. And for them to pinch a player like that from under their noses just from one schoolboy game where a scout is sitting is quite phenomenal. But what I took from it is how they had that structure to identify a player, put him into the system, and he ended up playing 148 games for the All Blacks. I think that at this moment in time, the closest player we might have at being identified at such a young age, and even then there was a tug of war, and the Bulls won that pool was Handré Pollard. I know, Richard, you've got some inputs there about Handré. If we had to try and compare Pollard to McCaw, you got some background there on the lad.
Yeah, I know, because especially with Handré Pollard, I know, for instance, it's the same thing going back with Richie McCaw. It's more of it was more of a family thing as well. I know his parents, his dad was part of the Kiro school setup, and also they relocated to Pretoria from Langebaan or from that area as well during the same time. So it was his family also relocated to Pretoria, which I think also made a major swing in him going back or coming up to Pretoria. Another interesting point touching on the Richie McCaw saga there is that with him playing for Otago Boys High, that he missed out on the New Zealand school selection that year. The player that he actually missed out to was an oak called Sam Harding. Now, Sam Harding actually joined, he actually went to Otago University. They were in the same year, and that actually was also one of the things that swayed McCaw to go to Lincoln University in Christchurch and not to Otago, is because his direct competitor was going to Otago. So he then made the decision to go. Yeah, and if you look at Sam Harding, actually only played one test match for New Zealand against Fiji, and that's all they wrote. So it again was a case of him making the correct decisions there. Again, with the family structures there as well, still being close to the family structures. I mean, if you had to compare, trying to compare a move from Christchurch, from Dunedin to Christchurch, is unfortunately not the same as a move from Pretoria to Cape Town. It's more of a Joburg-Pretoria distance type thing if you had to compare the two. So I think that also made it a lot more easier for him as well, also having that family set up not too far away as well.
Yeah. And Greg, just to bring you in on this point, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't Nick Costa a Rondebosch boy?
No, Bishops.
Bishops, okay, sorry, my bad. You guys, your guys' claim to claim is David's, isn't it, for the Sevens?
Yeah, sure. Used to take a lot of hurt from Nick Costa and his teammates back in school days. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Didn't you guys have a player identified during your time that, you know, like for me it was Joe Finekak identified, went in, and you were hoping you'd play 100 tests, ended up only playing 50. So I was just wondering if you, in your time.
Well, Nick Groom is a year younger than me, and he went through the age group levels, and he was first team, if I'm not mistaken. No, he wasn't the captain, but he was definitely identified at that stage. I mean, also was in a very successful Rondebosch side in 08, so he would have been before David's, but definitely one to talk about the few that were identified.
Yeah, you see, the reason I'm bringing these names up is, I think in South Africa, and Richard and I, actually one of our very first podcasts when we spoke about this was we spoke about the craft of rugby and the preparation of youngsters for professional rugby. And in South Africa, we've got a very strong schoolboy rugby, specifically amongst the traditionally older schools and richer schools with lots of heritage. So the training and the establishment of talent and identification of talent isn't necessarily the issue. The big problem comes after school. And we've had this week a couple of news articles of how Big Joe explained how he wasn't necessarily prepared for professional rugby when he came out of school. Lots of partying and doping after a game, which we all do. But you know, to be a professional rugby player, it's kind of summed up in this movie by Richie McCaw, where you need to make sacrifices, and you know, he sacrificed having a young family, having a girlfriend, and focusing on and being almost single-minded in his approach to what he wanted to achieve. So, you know, like if we had to take that model, you know, how many more talented players could we produce of that caliber that could go on to play, and at this stage almost represent any country in the world the way we feeding teams around the world. Richard, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, a few points there, I think. So firstly, you're speaking about the way that McCaw approached it, and one of the aspects that I picked up in the movie was, again, the humility aspect, where they've got that clip of him sitting almost shy with the tracksuit half over his face at a family gathering, where they're announcing the 2001 All Black squad to tour to the UK, and him almost being half surprised and taken aback that they had already had a bottle of champagne ready should he have been announced, and that humility of not expecting that where it feels to me that in South Africa, we've almost got this where a schoolboy gets identified at the same as the same type of talent, that there's half of this half entitlement being is bestowed upon them. I mean, examples of that is last year we had these reports of schoolboys earning 40,000 rand per month from the Blue Bulls and not even having played a single game yet for the union. So we've got this we've had this almost sense of creating the sense of entitlement for a lot of younger players, that you are the be all and end all. You are going to be these magnificent rugby players. I mean, I remember even when I was first year at university, we had the big talk was around the Eberson brothers, of them being the two next big things. And unfortunately, not one of them actually even made the Springboks at the end of the day. So hopefully that will change with the new model that Rassie's brought in. And I think that's also for a discussion we'll have later in the week, where the Varsity Cup might actually even be could come in as a better mentorship program than what it is currently in its current form, and what we might need in South Africa to mentor the players correctly and have the correct structures around for them.
Yeah. And as we head into the conclusion part, we'll start with Greg there. If there's any things you'd like to add, or things that any lessons that you learned that you can take out and express to your friends and the team when you get back to playing.
Well, yeah. Well, I think this to watch this documentary is good prep for any team-based environment that you would be involved in. I'm sort of thinking about my from a club rugby level, it would be quite a positive experience to watch this with your teammates, just to have that experience together. But the last sort of concluding factor I'd like to mention here is that, I mean, there were so many other, and we mentioned offline, there were so many other greats that bowed out in that 2015 tournament, and you didn't have the fairy tale who weren't able to choose the exact sort of going out at the top of their game. Your Victor Matfields, your Bucky's Botha, Ferry du Preez, Thierry Dusatoir, to name a few that went out in 2015. So Richie McCaw obviously went out at the top of the game, back-to-back World Cup wins, 148 test matches, as you mentioned earlier. And I think that just is a testament to him, his staying power, his mental capacity to deal with those hardships that he had along the way. And it'll be interesting to see his sort of next step. I mean, if he sort of recluses into that sort of farm lifestyle, would be good enough for him, I guess. And he'll be content in that position. But I thoroughly enjoyed the docu and obviously the chat that has ensued. And I come back to my previous point. I just hope there was a good docu crew around Siya Kolisi over the last 2-3 years, that we can have this chat in a few years' time, and just breaking down the sort of the majesty of the man that he is.
Yeah, I'd love.
Yeah, Invictus too.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Richard.
And I said, well, we can call that one Invictus too.
Yeah. No, Richard, any concluding marks there from you?
Yeah, I think maybe to add on with Greg as well as a lot of the principles that were brought across from Richie McCaw in the movie was it's very interchangeable in other aspects of life as well, such as business and or even personal growth, where you mentioned him maybe secluding to the farm life. I mean, on the other end of the scale, you can even have him following the same path as John Eales, and with those principles that he's already lived by for the last 15 years of his professional career, and that gets instilled in him every day, he would be a fantastic CEO, which is which John Eales currently is in Australia. So he would actually be a very big asset to the business world as well. So it would be interesting, as you say, to see what his next move will be in that sense.
Yeah.
Well, just before you go, Andre, full curds. I need more full curds in my life. I mean, he had like a 2-minute little soundbite in there, but I need more full curds.
Yeah.
Well, we might get that, if
I hope so.
Yeah, no, James, thank you very much. I really appreciated you guys taking the time to watch this documentary that we were able to get our hands on, and giving us and the listeners your insights on it. As Richard mentioned, on Wednesday night we're going to be having a look at Varsity Cup, and we'll be getting a new guy in, old Angus Opperman, who's got his own little YouTube channel, and we'll get him in. He's a big Marty supporter.
Nice.
And we'll have a look at the history and the breakdown of Varsity Cup and the way forward. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Enjoyed it.